So tonight we're going to have a very different theme, all about flying wings. And it fits in with the theme of the Golden Gate wing because this is all military type missions for this aircraft. We're going to see how they were developed, first in Germany and then in the USA. It's a very interesting story. So let's, without further ado, look at the agenda for tonight. We'll explain why flying wings. Why do you even consider this design? It was very challenging to do correctly. We'll look at how they were developed. We're going to go into great depth on Northrop. All of Northrop's flying wings you're going to see tonight, and with special emphasis on the latest and greatest Northrop Grumman B-2A Spirit. Did you know that this year we mark 20 years of service for our country? Amazing. It went into first delivery to the Air Force, December 1993. And they've also been a fixture since 1997 for every Tournament of Roses parade in Pasadena on New Year's Day. There's always a B-2 flyover. And you saw it on TV this last January. It was a little different. Instead of leading off the parade, they showed up in the middle of the parade. Just as the Korean War vet float was coming out on Colorado Boulevard, the B-2 snuck up on us and wagged its wings and saluting the Korean War vets. It was very classy, moved by the B-2. All right, so I'm going to go into a little bit about the technology, not too much. The last time I gave this was an engineering seminar at San Jose State back in April. But for this audience, I'm going to dial that back a bit and condense the presentation. We're talking about combat. There are 4 combat campaigns this has been involved in. This is a terrible crash in Guam in 2008. I'm going to explain how that happened. We'll look at the future. We'll wrap it up. Now, I've got a few video clips. You're going to see historical Northrop flying wings flying and some wonderful stuff on the B-2 that's very current. So why would you even consider a flying wing? First it started out, Northrop was promoting it as a more efficient airframe, as a very high ratio of lift to drag. So you get low profile drag, and so that supposedly gives you more range as a bomber. It might give you higher speed as a bomber, and that attracted the attention of the Air Force, the Army Air Force, during World War II, when these were all in development. These were top secret developments with test flights out at Muroc, the Army Air Base in Southern California, all during World War II, and so we're going to see examples of the planes flying there. So, but it turns out that today, the #1 advantage of the flying wing is its low observability. There are a lot of reasons why this can hide well from radar, and so I'm going to get into that in more depth. So Jack Northrop, who was this guy? He was the foremost proponent for flying wings here in the U.S. Here's a guy who had just a high school education and was doing drafting work for an architect. Lockheed hired him. And then he went on to work for Donald Douglas in Santa Monica and El Segundo. And he somehow was able to design successful aircraft for these 2 major nameplates in the business. Lockheed Vega and so forth. There's a great aircraft that he designed. How did he do this with no training as an aero engineer? It's amazing. You can say the same thing about the Wright brothers, who neither one of them completed their high school education. But look at the developments they came up with. They were world class. So by the late 30s, he left Douglas and started up his own company and immediately went into doing this classified work for Hap Arnold in the Air Force. And we'll look at his products first, the N1M, the N9M, XB35, so forth. We're going to see all of the pictures of these and how they looked, how they performed. So he started out with all piston and then switched over to jet. And there were a lot of developmental problems and unfortunate crashes that basically turned off the Air Force. The Air Force just canceled all the contracts with all these developmental difficulties at Northrop. And so Jack finally, he resigned in disgust from his own company, 1952, but the company went on, it made other good stuff. I mean, an F-89 Scorpion, the P-61 Black Widow, the F-5 fighter, it was a great export product. So there's a lot of things Northrop did, but Jack didn't stick around. After his beloved flying wings were axed by the Air Force for some fairly good reasons. The products he were producing were not good, stable bombing platforms for certain technical reasons. So now Northrop was invited by the U.S. government to put together a concept stealth bomber in competition with Lockheed in the late 70s. Northrop actually was not interested in doing this work. The Air Force twisted their arm, so we want you to bid against Lockheed for a stealth bomber. And Northrop said, well, okay, well, let's bring Boeing in. They brought Boeing in as a strategic partner who ended up actually building, most of this aircraft was actually built by Boeing. And some key parts were done by Northrop. Okay, so now we had a production of the B-2A, but now we have all kinds of unmanned combat aerial vehicles coming out that are kind of the wave of the future, unmanned drones and so forth. We'll see pictures of them. And they're all flying wings, every one of them. Why is that? Because of their low observability. Now, we cannot overlook the pioneering work in Germany by the Horten brothers. They were doing work on the flying wings in the 1930s, really well ahead of Jack Northrop, and they had flying wings. Here they are, examples of, there were 3 built of this Horten 229. 3 built, 2 flew in January and February 1945, very late in the war. The 3rd one was in final assembly, not yet flown, and it became the spoils of war. We captured it, brought it back to the U.S., and went to the National Air and Space Museum in the Garber facility. Now look down below here. This is an exact replica of a Horten 229 built by Northrop for test purposes. They went back to the Garber facility, took all the measurements of an actual Horten, reproduced it, and then took this thing out and put it out in the field and did radar observability on it, low observability tests, radar tests, and they were able to learn the German lessons and put that into the B-2 program. And then when they're all done, they said, okay, they handed it to the San Diego Aerospace Museum, where that replica is today. Now, an interesting construction here. This is all plywood aircraft, so it can't reflect radar waves. They go right through wood. Not only that, but the glue they used was loaded with sawdust and carbon black, which kind of absorbed RF energy. I mean, they were thinking stealth before the word was really invented. This is yet another example of the leading edge work by German aero engineers in the 1940s that were ahead of us in so many ways. I mean, they had the jet engine, they had the swept wing, they had the delta wing, they had the flying wing. The list goes on and on and on. All these developments first in Germany. Now, here's Northrop's first crewed effort at a flying wing. He left Lockheed in 1928 and formed Avion. Then the company was later sold to United Aircraft in 1930. But we're starting to see the elements of a flying wing. It's still got a little boom structure out in the back there. Now, he built 2 versions. A tractor version, not shown here, had a Monasco A4 inline 4 upside down 90 horsepower engine. This one has a pusher version, has a Cirrus inline 4 engine. So this is just, crude early work by Northrop. Now we're going to see this aircraft fly in newsreel footage. This is a nice little GA aircraft kind of thing because it's got 2 Franklin flat 6 engines, about 120 horsepower. The thing is about this aircraft, which first flew by accident in 1940. They took off and they weren't supposed to. First official first flight was 1941. It was extremely unstable. And it was unstable in yaw and was also susceptible to Dutch roll, these sickening S-turns in the sky. So this was a handful. The first version was way underpowered. They had to re-engine it and so that it would fly. You'll get to see it fly. It's a nifty little starter program. Again, top secret, flying out at Muroc. Southern California. This is, I'm not sure whether this is the National Museum of the Air Force or whether it's Udvar Hazy in Dulles. I'll have to look that up. Now, this is the much better version that followed, the N9M. 4 built, 1 still flying. This one belongs to the Chino Planes of Fame Museum, Southern California. It's on the air show circuit. Now we've got much better controls. For the first time, we have a flying wing that has clamshell drag rudders out here for yaw control. And it's got much more power. It has twin Franklin flat 8 supercharged engines, 300 horsepower each. And it had the very most modern control actuators, so-called irreversible hydraulic controls with artificial force feedback. This is still used today in a lot of production aircraft, airliners and so forth, use the irreversible hydraulics. So Northrop was at the cutting edge here. This was designed to be a 1/3 scale of the full-size XB-35 bomber to follow. So the Army Air Force was happy to spend money on these R&D demonstrators to prove out the concept. And so the N9M, some of you got to see it fly down at Chino and at various air shows. So this is a very nifty aircraft, and this is much more controllable, the N1M. Let me elaborate a little bit on the clamshell drag rudders. Because this aircraft has no tail, it has an unusual problem getting this thing to turn and produce a yaw. So there's no empennage out here with a rudder back here. So you have to play games. Instead, the common practice is to open up a clamshell, a drag rudder, so you create drag on this side and not that side, and you do this. Another way to get yaw control is to close down these clamshells and then use differential thrust of the engines. Now, here's a little tidbit that many of you may not know, but whenever the B-2 flies in public, the clamshell drag rudders are always open, plus or minus 5 degrees. Why is that? They're deliberately boosting the radar cross-section of the aircraft. They do not want you to know how good this is in their radar cross-section. So they will fool you all the time in civil use, but in combat use, where it actually has been used in combat, they'll close down those clamshells, they'll minimum radar cross-section, and then fine-tune yaw with a differential thrust here. So that's a nifty little fact about the B-2 program. And I'm going to talk about how good the radar cross-section is shortly. Another thing, because this has no long tail, it has no elevator back here to give it leverage for pitch control, they had to put lots of elevons on here, inner and outer elevons, to give them pitch authority. And this aircraft also has a nifty active control surface called a gust damper. This beaver tail back here actually moves. This was a result of a complete redesign of the B-2 program. Here's what happened. In the early 1980s, the Air Force changed all the requirements. They said, oh, instead of a high altitude bomber, we wanted to come in low. Oh my God, they had to recalculate all the stresses in the airframe. They just start over, basically. It's why this program took so long, was so expensive. That redesign was part of the issue. So they ended up adding more elevons and beefed it up. And the aircraft got heavier, stronger, and much better. Now, the N9M evolved into this monster, 200,000 pound roughly gross takeoff weight. Has 4 of those mighty Pratt & Whitney corncob radials, the R4360 Wasp Major. Notice the engines are flipped around backwards so that the prop shafts are at the rear and they draw air through a tunnel. There's leading edge nostrils, if you will, draw air in through a tunnel. That's like a 2-speed fan that draws 200 horsepower, send air over the jugs and exits out the back here. Now the original, this is 4 times 3,000 horsepower, driving first contra-rotating props. Contra-rotating means that they share the same center line, but turning different directions. That gearbox was so, it was so poor that they had to rip out all the contra-rotating and go to a counter-rotating system, so that you might have the two engines on the left might be going clockwise, the two on the right could go counterclockwise. And that's the end of the final configuration, the XB-35. So it's interesting, you have the pilot is in the bubble on the left-hand side of center line, and the bombardier is in a smaller compartment on the right side of the center line. These gearboxes on this model here were so bad, the time between overhauls were like 10 hours. They're just atrocious. So they had to rip that out. All right, XB-35, they had a substantial order dating back to 1941 for these, but not many were actually built and flyable. It evolved into the jet version, the YB-49, that had the same wingspan and a similar gross takeoff weight, but now you have 8 turbojets in here. Allison built GE design J-35s, 4,000 pounds thrust, and very thirsty. So now the Air Force is not amused. This is no longer a long-range bomber. It's a medium-range bomber. These 8 turbojets ate up a lot of fuel. And you'll notice that they put these, for yaw stability, these tiny little vertical tail fins on there helped a little bit. But by the time they got to the B-2, they eliminated that. Now, what they found in actual bomb run tests, this against the B-36, this was a less stable bombing platform. What happened? Well, one thing they had is dithering yaw. It was so bad the bombardier up front was getting airsick looking at the Norden bomb site down there, like this. Not good. The Air Force took notes on that, did not like to see that. Again, the yaw stability is due to the fact that it has no tail. It has no vertical tail surface back here that acts like a weather vane. So what they did, they put automatic yaw dampers in to the drag rudders, and that helped somewhat. But still, when you look at the official Air Force reports on this aircraft as a bombing platform, they found marginal stability in all 3 axes of control. Not unstable, but marginal. So here you go. You got pitch stability, roll stability, and yaw stability. They had trouble with all 3 of those. Now, it didn't help also that both of the ones that they built crashed. The first crash was June 1948. Captain Glenn Edwards was at the controls, and that resulted in Edwards Air Force Base. Major Forbes and a few other guys were on board. Here's what happened. They put this thing into a stall, and then it went into a spin, and they couldn't recover from the spin. Trying to recover from the spin, they overstressed the airframe and it fell apart. This is not good if you're trying to get into a production program. Now listen to what happened to the other one later. Was doing a high-speed taxi test, and the front nose gear started to shimmy, and it just destroyed the whole airframe. Never taking off, just sitting there going down the taxiway high speed. So this was not good. It set a combat radius of about 1,600 miles, 46,000 feet service ceiling. Now it's interesting, because they had the engines in the wings, these were fat wings, high drag. So this was actually 100 miles an hour slower top speed than Boeing's B-47, which was ultra low drag. So again, this is like a 510 mile an hour aircraft, B-47, add 100 to it. So that was an interesting finding. And for reasons like this, low speed, instability, unfortunate crashes, they ended up canceling the program. Northrop was sick about it, that his beloved flying wings were biting the dust. This was the last throw for Northrop while he was still in charge. This is a reconnaissance version. Look what they did. They spoiled the looks of this thing. They got 2 turbojets in here, and they slung one underneath here on each side. This was supposed to be a camera platform. So 30 were ordered. One was built and flown briefly. They ended up canceling the program, and this thing was scrapped in 1953. Again, what was the problem? It was not a stable camera platform. I mean, if you're going to take pictures at 40,000 feet, it's got to sit still. So these problems were solved later with new technology. When they got fly-by-wire technology, now they could get all the stability issues were solved immediately, which made the B-2 feasible. Now, moving on to the current aircraft in service, the famous B-2A Spirit. By the way, in the Air Force, nobody calls it the Spirit. They're looking for another nickname for this, but that's the official name of the aircraft. So just a handful built. They started with orders for 153. It went down to 75, then went down to 20, and then up to 21. So we had one loss. We're going to talk about that crash. And then there's another one of those 21, which is set aside for full-time test for NASA at Dryden. In addition, there's 2 static airframes that were built for test only. They had no avionics and stuff. One of them was back, so reportedly back at the National Museum of the Air Force. It has one of those static ones. So here you can see the basic specs. It's a pretty heavy bomber. It can carry a lot of ordnance. It can fly high, it can fly low, high subsonic speeds. It has exactly the same wingspan. Was this a coincidence? Exactly the same wingspan as the XB-35 and the YB-49. How did that happen? So, so there we are. Let's look at more about the B-2. This is out in the public literature, but some of the information I'm giving you on the B-2 is sensitive. But it's not classified and it's out there in the public domain. But this number is ultra sensitive. How good is the RCS? This is the number that appears there. I'm saying it's probably better than that. They don't want you to know how much better than that. So that's the equivalent of holding up a mirror to a radar. That's how big that rectangle is, 0.1 square meter mirror reflecting back at the radar, how big an image it presents. So this, by any measure, this is good, and it's probably the best on Earth of any aircraft. By the way, the RCS changes depending on the angle that you measure it from. It turns out that the B-2 is the stealthiest when it comes at you dead on. You're not going to see it coming until it's right over your head and the bombs are dropping. So this is an enormous asset in our inventory of warfighting equipment. There's no other Air Force on Earth has anything this good. Now, it is interesting to note that this was a surprise to me. I thought a lot of the radar evasion was due to the coatings. No, it turns out 90% of the radar evasion is due to the shape of the aircraft. This is full of compound curves, changing radii and so forth. So when a radar signal impinges on it, it goes off at cockeyed angles. Almost essentially nothing goes right back to the transmitter. So, and then the last 10% of stealth comes from the radar absorbing materials. Well, what is this material? From what I've read in the literature, we've got like an organic or resin polymer base, and it's loaded with little particles of ceramic ferrite. This is iron oxide, particles and beads of different sizes, which resonate or shake according to different bands of frequencies of radar thrown at them. Well, what happens? When RF energy hits this coating, it converts to heat. Oh, what a wonderful thing. Now there's nothing to reflect back. It's turned into heat. So that's the key for stealth on these coatings. And they've experimented with all kinds of different coatings. Here's an example. This is the very latest and greatest coating I put on the aircraft now. And they're getting better at doing this and maintaining that coating. But when you want a stealthy aircraft, folks, it's not just radar you're worrying about. You don't want to see it coming. You don't want to hear it coming. So you don't want acoustic noise or minimal noise. You don't want to see a thermal signature, IR, infrared signature. So the B-2 has clever ways of mixing in cold bypass air into the exhaust duct going out the back. So B-2 has looked at all of these aspects of low observability. Okay, we've already talked about the notorious instability in yaw. So when you get fly-by-wire, those magically get handled. This is a quad-redundant GE fly-by-wire system that's in the B-2. It's similar to the one that's in the F-16 fighter. So getting stability is huge, and getting the design right, it just takes years and years and years to do it right. And then the manufacturing nightmares are amazing, how they did this. The early prototype work was done at the Pico Rivera plant in Southern California. I've been by that plant. It used to be a Ford assembly plant. But the final assembly was out at an Air Force plant in Palmdale. And it's interesting to note that this program was so black, so secret, that every employee, from the janitor to the CEO or top manager of the operation, all had to have top secret background checks. This added probably 20% to the cost of the program just for that, squaring away the people. And it added years to get all these people checked out and get it done right. Now the maintenance. Oh, it's notorious. Up to 55 hours of playing with those coatings for every hour. Now they got it down to about 9 hours now. It's much better now, but that's how bad it used to be. All of these access panels that we have to get into the internals have a coating over them. You got to rip the coating off, open up the panel, do your maintenance, button it up again, and it's just a lot of hand labor to get this done. But if you want the best stealth on Earth, I mean, they just had to learn to live with that. You can see those drag rudders wide open there. You could use those. You could use those in unison as air brakes, but also differentially for yaw. Here's the turbofan engine. Pretty good power to weight, better than 5-to-1. No afterburner needed. This engine has worked well, except in one case they had an engine fire in a B-2 in 2010. The damage was so serious it's not going to be flying again until next year. That's how many years of repairs if you have an engine fire inside a B-2. It's just amazing. You can see the refueling here. The KC-10A actually works better with a B-2 than the KC-135, as it turns out. But look at the longest mission, more than 3 days. How could you stand to be in a cramped cockpit that long? Fortunately, they had a 6-foot cot, so they could cruise, 2-man crew, they could rotate out. Some guy could take a nap, the other one will. And they had a capability of producing hot food. Maybe they had a microwave oven. You wonder, well, where's the bathroom in this thing? I think they had like a stainless steel honey pot was available. And now, ladies, listen to this, that since 2003, they've had mixed crews, fully qualified female pilots for the B-2, flying with men. There's no privacy in this aircraft if you have to use the honey pot. So that's the way it goes. Now here's the famous takeoff down at Palmdale in 1989. So this aircraft was actually in production from 87 to 97, and the rollout was in 1988. So the following year after the rollout, this is AV1, Air Vehicle 1, finally took off. And now the interesting thing, pilots, about this aircraft is it has so much lift. It has over 5,000 square feet of wing area. It's got more lift than it knows what to do with, and so it needs no flaps and no leading edge slats. Got beaucoup lift. It turns out that the lift force is directly proportional to the surface area of the wing, and there's no shortage of surface area here. It's all wing, this aircraft. Now let's go in for a landing. Now pilots, let me ask you this. How would you like to fly a plane that does not want to land? No, get into ground flight and float and float and float, float, doesn't want to touch down. It has so damn much lift. So you got to open those clamshell drag rudders, get those speed brakes open so that you can get this thing to drop. Just like a glider. Yeah, I mean, there's a tremendous ratio of lift to drag, like a glider. So there you go. Okay, here's your office pilots. Now you've got to admire these instruments. They've been constantly upgraded. They now have like LCD displays, or replaced the old-fashioned CRT vacuum tube TV tubes. So they've been keeping very current on the cockpit. But interesting thing about this cockpit, folks, this is not a Boeing bomber with a yoke. This is stick and rudder. Many purists would say this is the only real flying, stick and rudder. So this is what you've got in the B-2. And now, I've looked at the pilot, I've studied the pilot reports. What do they say about this aircraft? Wonderfully stable, especially down at the deck. It's pleasant to fly. There are no quirks in this, like the B-47 had a lot of quirks. It is heavy. I mean, 300,000 pound roast heavy, so it's a bit ponderous. It's not going to have a roll rate like an F-16 fighter, which, by the way, I couldn't believe the roll rate. This actual roll rate on the F-16 is 720 degrees per second. 2 revs per second if you let it. But the flight computer in the F-16 says, after 90 degrees, you don't get that roll rate anymore. We're going to slow it down to save you and save the aircraft. So this is a very nice cockpit. And by the way, the left seat and right seat, these people are all cross-trained. So the one in the right seat might be the weapons operator and do the bomb drops and so forth. And so each one can do each other's job. Now, on to combat. It all began with this NATO operation where these were attacks on Serbia because they're doing ethnic cleansing in Bosnia, and they were taking on Kosovo and so forth. So this was the first use by our military of JDAMs. These were satellite GPS guided smart munitions. So this all began with this first mission. Here we sent in 9 B-2As came in from the U.S., dropped the bombs, turned around and go back to the U.S. Whiteman Air Force Base, Missouri. So now they changed the tactics when they went into Afghanistan, 2001. They used 6 B-2As, and there they used, they were going from Whiteman, hit Afghanistan, hit the target, and then go on to Diego Garcia. So the next campaign, Operation Iraqi Freedom, they had 4 B-2As that were stationed full-time at Diego Garcia. They would go into Iraq as needed. They had bunker busters. They had a lot of neat stuff. And by the time they got into the Iraqi campaign, the mission capable rate was up to 85%. It was as low as 50 to 55% when it started into combat, which was really sad. But they got better and better. Now the last campaign was in Libya. They sent in 3 B-2s from Missouri, and they took out 45 hardened aircraft shelters in the north part of Libya in Sirte. So they continued to do their work very well. And because of their ability to sneak up on you, I mean, you can't underestimate the value of sneakiness in combat. You coming up to an enemy and they don't know you're there, and you hit them hard. And the B-2 can deliver it anywhere in the world at any time. So commanders like to have this in their back pocket if they need it. And I'm sure they'll find more campaigns as we go forward where this can be used. Now, some of you may remember in March, the B-2 had a wonderful show of force. We sent 2 of them over to Korea to intimidate the outlaw head of state of North Korea, who was threatening to send nuclear weapons at the U.S. and so forth. So this was neat. We made our point. We made our point sending the B-2As over there and did joint exercises with the South Korean forces. Oh my God, this was a terrible accident. This is a number 12 of the 21 built. This is a Spirit of Kansas. Let's review what happened here. Now this is a tropical island, Guam, and there was a lot of moisture in the air. And it got in there and it fouled up the pitot tube airspeed indicator sensors. And guys, all pitot tubes are equipped with heaters. You're supposed to use the heaters to drive off moisture, get the ice out of there and so forth. Apparently it was not used, so they had a fouled up sensor. They took off and they fooled the flight computers. The flight computers said, "Hey Jack, you're taking off with a minus 10 degree angle of attack." Oh, let me fix that. Plus 30. So you can see this. There's an actual video on YouTube of this accident happening from the base security camera at Guam. It's coming down the runway. It pitches up 30 degrees, uncommanded. The pilots didn't know what was happening. It lost its lift. It drifted down. You can see it rolling to the left. This digs into the grass next to the runway. It rolls off the center line, hits the grass. As soon as this impact occurred, these guys punched out about 1 second before Armageddon. Now, if you ever have to punch out, guys, you don't want to do this at low level altitudes. One of the guys was severely injured. He had spinal compression fractures from landing from such a low altitude punch out. The other guy came out much better. So this was about a $2 billion loss. That was completely avoidable. There is no reason why this happened.
Are they still flying?
You mean the aircrew guys? Yeah. That's a good question. I think the one who was severely injured probably got a medical discharge. The other one, I don't know, probably got back into service. I mean, it wasn't their fault. It was equipment malfunction. And they couldn't forestall it and prevent it.
Was there a maintenance factor in that?
Well, there's a good question. Was this equipment, were these sensors properly maintained? Did anybody inspect them and look at them? I told the engineering students down at San Jose State, you guys, you have to figure out a way to measure the veracity of the data you're getting from sensors. If this looks screwy, you got to ask questions. Don't take off if you're getting bad or suspicious data from your sensors.
Could they have aborted?
Aborted the takeoff? Well, at that point, yeah, they're committed to takeoff. They couldn't reject the takeoff. They're already in the air, and they lost their lift. And how are they going to get the lift back? I mean, they're starting to roll out of control. And they just had seconds to make decisions, very few seconds. You can see in the YouTube video. It was very sad how this thing went down.
You know if the pitot heat was automatically on normally, or was it manually controllable?
Probably manual. And it wasn't on a checklist.
Then it was their fault.
Well, all right, you could, yeah, was that on the checklist and did they check it off? Did they actually look at that? This, it should not have been susceptible to this. I mean, I would have to look at some engineering decisions surrounding this, as well as the human factors. Okay, so here's the future of flying wings. UCAVs, unmanned combat aerial vehicles, a lot of them in development. The X-45B was recently in carrier tests for the Navy. Got the X-45C is nifty. There's another flying wing that was formerly classified, is now unclassified, is the Lockheed Martin RQ-170 Sentinel. Iran claims they shot one down, and it's a flying wing. It has a sand tan color, but it is, the U.S. side is saying, oh, well, it ran out of fuel or it got fooled somehow. It was not shot down, but we'll never know what happened with that Sentinel. That's not something we want to hand to the Iranians. Okay, so we saw Jack Northrop had a dream that actually went into production. And you may have heard the story that Jack was brought in 1980, months before he died, to get an exclusive top secret briefing on the new B-2 stealth bomber. And he was delirious with joy. He was holding a model of the B-2. According to eyewitnesses at the meeting, he was holding a model and his hands were shaking. I mean, he was vindicated. Finally, he got his ideas were proven out and shown to be correct and put into Air Force service. So that had to be the highlight of his life. He said afterwards, now I know why the Lord gave me another 25 years to live, for this moment, to see this happen. So we've seen a lot of technical advantages in the design. Certainly had a rough start. The unbelievable cost, the program cost was like 44 or 45 billion, over 2 billion in airframe, and half of that, more than half of that, was really the R&D. There's a lot of R&D needed to make this thing happen. Great combat performance. We've seen how it works. Talked about the Tournament of Roses parade. That's a great PR for the Air Force. And we've seen the bright future they have in unmanned. So any quick questions now, or we'll go right to the video clips? Yes, sir.
You mentioned using differential thrust to create yaw. What are the single engine characteristics of that aircraft?
Well, it should be able to take off and climb out on, well, it's literally 4 engines there. There's 2 on each side.
There are 4.
There's actually 4 buried in there. It's 17,000 pounds thrust each. But they share a common inlet on each side. By the way, if any of you guys are into radio control electric aircraft, you can get your own B-2 replica, 63-foot wingspan. I've seen it fly on YouTube. It's a screamer. It has twin electric ducted fans, and all the control surfaces work. It has drag rudders. It has steerable nose gear. I mean, this is hot. You can get, it's a kit. You can get it for a few $100s if you want to fly your own B-2.
What was the wingspan on that?
63 inches, not 63 feet. Yeah, pardon? Off by an order of magnitude. So, yeah, it's foam. It's all made out of foam, so it's very light. It's nifty. You can see it fly on YouTube. All right, let's now go to some video clips. I'm going to put away the PowerPoint. Look at just a few short clips. And we're going to start with the N1M. I'm going to get the audio up.
Is a B-49, the flying wing. Anyone seen a flying disc? But let's go back to
Designed for the future is the Northrop flying wing. 1/2 to 1/3 scale model of a twin-engine transport, the wing has a span of about 38 feet, is fitted with 2 120-horsepower Franklin air-cooled engines, which drive pusher screws through 10-foot extension shafts. With no tail surface or fuselage, all portions of the aircraft contribute directly to lift. In this connection, main advantage of the flying wing is that its minimum profile drag is about 1/2 that of the conventional airplane. With comparable horsepower, wingspan, gross weight, and landing speed, the flying wing would have a maximum speed 15% greater and range about 22% greater than the conventional aircraft. It would have slightly greater ceiling, and its controllability and stability would be about the same as in another plane. First test flown in 1940, hundreds of successful flights have been made to date. However, first models do not necessarily represent what later versions will look like. Several Air Force projects to use the wing in combat are under development, but the main post-war potentiality points to the wing's use in the long-range transport field.
The Northrop Flying Wing stands ready for the long-awaited test flight at Inglewood, California. Test pilot Max Stanley and his crew go aboard. The climax of 7 years of engineering research is at hand for the 25-ton monster, and it's contact. The 4 3,000-horsepower motors turn the coaxial propellers of the 25-ton giant. Pilots have expressed amazement that the tailless craft has precisely the same flight characteristics as conventional models. With slow, almost lazy grace, the 172 feet of wing is airborne. 15 sister ships are under construction for the Army, which will use them as bombers. Fully loaded, they will weigh 50 tons. The flight engineer is a busy man during the test flight. A radical change in design and a new chapter in the steady march of aviation comes forward to challenge the imagination.
Just stop here for a little editorial comment. It sounded like a Northrop puff piece. I mean, the same stability and characteristics as regular aircraft. That is not true from flight tests. And they got the weight of the XB-35 off by a factor of 2. 200,000 pounds is 100 tons, not 50 tons. So anyway, I just noticed that. Now we're going to go on going to go fast forward here to the YB-49 program, get into the jet version.
Sacred Justice direct his will
Plane. The huge $13 million experimental Northrop plane, called the Flying Wing, is given its first trial with Army test pilots at the controls. It is capable of carrying twice the bomb load of a Super Fortress.
is groomed for its first flight at the Northrop plant in Hawthorne, California. Called YB-49, the huge 100-ton dreadnought packs 32,000 horsepower in its 8 jet engines. At the controls during the initial flight are veteran test pilot Max Stanley, center, and crew of 2. Theirs is a big job, and like a giant boomerang, the mammoth craft picks up speed. Trailing streams of smoke from its jets, Uncle Sam's latest ace of the atom age passes its test with flying colors. Experiments with the Northrop Flying Wing, a frightening vision of the future. And here's the hot...
This baby climb. Jet assist. What is it?
Okay, now we're going to flip over to a couple short clips of the B-2 in action. So I have fairly amusing observations in these newsreel footage. They're kind of glowing reports. If they only could see what some of the truth behind the scenes, the public was not allowed to know.
Faster bombers carried heavier weapons over targets protected by
Chapter 1. Okay, this is a little, pardon me. This is what I wanted, the menu. Let's do a little introduction, 1 or 2 minutes.
In the history of aviation, there has never been a plane more groundbreaking than the B-2 stealth bomber. Capable of flying anywhere in the world undetected, the B-2 can arrive over its target, release precision munitions, and escape, confident in the fact that the bombs will hit their targets and that the plane will return home safely. Revolutionary in design and capability, the B-2 represents the culmination of many disciplines and sciences, from aeronautics to stealth to bombing itself. It also has a distinction unshared by any conventional aircraft. For the entirety of its service life, the B-2 has never been detected, targeted, or engaged.
Wow.
The B-2 is flown exclusively by the United States Air Force and is the most sophisticated flying machine in existence. Its creation relied on 100 years of bombing experience, the evolution of computers, radical jumps in engineering.
Okay. I want to find another chapter views here. Stand by. Okay, some of these, there's no time to show you all these chapters. The stealth chapter is long and it's full of engineering detail. I'm going to skip over that. The history is very long and goes into a lot of non-B2 predecessors. Let's talk about missions. Let's do missions.
The B-2's mission is to penetrate heavily defended areas, drop precision-guided munitions, and extract itself without ever being detected.
That'd be the ultimate capability, to be able to go in undetected and leave undetected. However, there's one unique aspect of all bombers. If you're going in, you're more than likely going in to drop something. So right off the bat, as soon as bombs start going off, someone's going to know there's an aircraft in the sky. So as you're leaving the country, really what you're looking for now is that ability to sneak back out of the country.
The power of stealth was demonstrated fully in the 1991 Gulf War. F-117A Nighthawk strike aircraft destroyed military targets deep in the heart of Baghdad without ever being detected. At the time, Baghdad had the most sophisticated grid of interlocking defensive and anti-aircraft radar systems ever fielded. During the course of the war, F-117 aircraft engaged targets in Iraq 1,271 times and lost 0 aircraft. This was due almost entirely to the F-117's stealthy radar cross-section. That the B-2 has an even smaller radar cross-section with less detectable LO characteristics, paired with a bomb capacity 8 times that of the F-117, is a testament to its potential.
The B-2 is a stealth aircraft. It's designed to basically kick down the door to open up that entryway for other aircraft.
Any B-2 mission begins with planning. Positions of known radar sites, as well as any missile sites and intercept aircraft, have to be plotted. The B-2 deflects some radar and absorbs some radar, but it's not impervious. For this reason, B-2 pilots must determine the best route through known radar positions, known as the corridor.
The B-2 enables us to pull the wool over the enemy's eyes and significantly darken his view. So with that in mind, there may be advantages to making different turns and going different directions en route to the target with the bomber to enable us to accomplish the mission.
The amount of radar an aircraft reflects is called its radar cross-section, or RCS. As aircraft approach radar sites, they encounter more radar energy, which increases RCS. This means that an aircraft which is undetectable at long range becomes detectable at close range. Defensive radar networks are set up around strategic areas using multiple radar sites. The size of an aircraft's radar cross-section and its proximity to the radar site determines when it can be detected. All of this is taken into consideration so that the individual radar site zones of detection overlap, effectively creating a wall of radar. Because the B-2's radar cross-section is so much smaller than all other military aircraft, it can only be detected at extremely close range. Thus, the overlapping zones of radar which detect all other aircraft are useless against the B-2, and the radar wall develops holes through which the B-2 slips. Once over the target, the B-2 releases bombs which are individually targeted and self-guiding.
Typically, like I said, we knock the door down, we go in first and lead the way for other aircraft with a larger radar signature to come in and strike targets to drop those unguided weapons.
Thus, the B-2 can arrive over its target unannounced, release fire and forget weapons, and leave craters as the only evidence of its presence.
Okay, the last piece I'm going to show you is the weapons. We're going to see these wonderful JDAMs that they carry that have satellite GPS guidance. And each tail kit they put on a dumb bomb costs us taxpayers about $20,000 to $30,000. Money well spent when you see the accuracy they get from that.
It is only fitting that the most sophisticated bomber on Earth carries the world's most sophisticated arsenal. The B-2 can carry anywhere from 80 500-pound bombs to 8 5,000-pound bunker busters. Other options include sea mines, stealthy cruise missiles, and just about everything in between. The crown jewel in the B-2's arsenal is the 2,000-pound JDAM. JDAM stands for Joint Direct Attack Munition, but it's commonly shortened to Smart Bomb. The JDAM comes in a variety of weights, from 250 pounds to 5,000 pounds, although each variant has the same basic purpose: to deliver a high-powered explosive punch with pinpoint accuracy every time. A JDAM is made from a free-fall bomb, a strake assembly which adds stability, and a tail kit which contains satellite guidance equipment and the fins which steer the bomb. JDAMs can be programmed on the ground before they are loaded into the B-2, or they can be reprogrammed in flight to accommodate changing target conditions. The B-2 carries its weapons in a manner different from most other bombers. Where B-17s and the original B-52s carried their bombs stacked in racks to be released en masse, the B-2 uses a rotary launch assembly. When the pilot wants to drop a bomb, the bomb bay doors open. The assembly rotates to the correct position and drops the requested bomb. This allows the B-2 to carry different types of munitions, or bombs programmed for specific targets in the same bomb bay, and provides a connection between smart bombs and the B-2's computers. In the air, the B-2's onboard computers and the computers in the JDAM are linked, providing the smart bomb with up-to-the-minute information about target position and weather. During the B-2's 40-hour flight, targets may move, winds may shift, or storms may move in. The JDAM uses this information to correct its course and to assure maximum impact with minimal civilian casualties. The strake assembly and tail fins on the JDAM act like wings, giving it a gliding range of just under 8 miles. All the B-2 must do is pass within 8 miles of its target, and the JDAM will take care of the rest. Once the JDAM is released from the B-2, its guidance is internal. An extremely accurate satellite guidance receiver in the tail homes the JDAM in on its target. If the satellite guidance fails, the JDAM has an inertial guidance system backup. Accurate to within inches, it is the same system used on U.S. submarines for navigation. The most common load on the B-2 is 16 2,000-pound JDAMs. New technology called the Smart Bomb Rack Assembly will allow the B-2 to carry 80 smaller 500-pound JDAMs. This is over 4 times its previous capacity. Missions that would have required 5 B-2 flights now only require 1 because, for most targets, the 500-pound bomb is just as effective as the 2,000-pound bomb. The B-2 carries many other amazing weapons, including the AGM-158 stealth cruise missile. Angular in shape, the 158 is nearly invisible to radar. The 5,000-pound bunker buster is a variant of the JDAM, designed to penetrate deep into the earth and release a devastating explosion. From 500-pound smart bombs to stealth cruise missiles, The B-2 has the versatility to carry just about any weapon, anywhere on Earth, and deliver it with precision accuracy every time. The B-2 bomber has proven its effectiveness time and again. Through its use of low observability and smart weapons, the B-2 can engage targets with more accuracy, less civilian damage, and more safety for the pilots than any other aircraft in the world.
Okay, speaking of JDAM accuracy, some of you may remember this caused an international incident, but in the Operation Allied Force, we were attacking Serbia under Milosevic, and B-2 put multiple JDAMs right through the window into the Chinese embassy. And hey, the CIA gave the Air Force bad GPS coordinates. So that's what happened there. But the Chinese were not amused because I think they had 3 diplomats die from that. So anyway, the nameplate accuracy of the JDAM is 13 meters circular error probability, which means if you drop 100 of them, 50 will fall in that circle of 13 meters. It's actually much better than that. So there's a public number, and then there's the private classified number. There is another smart weapon that is actually more accurate, and that's laser guided munitions. You can get into centimeter accuracy there, but they're not all weather. You know, if you got precipitation and stuff going on, laser doesn't help you. GPS satellite is all weather, night and day, under all conditions. So that's my story. I hope you liked it. I'm open for any questions or comments at this time. There we are. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question. I know that one of the pilots of the B-2 was the grandson of General Paul Tibbets, the pilot of the Enola Gay. Have you ever read any reports from him about flying the B-2, commanding the B-2 squadron, anything like that?
I haven't seen any publicity regarding that gentleman. These people they trot out for public comment are very carefully screened and very highly scripted. So you know that's closely controlled. So I can't add more on that.
Do you have the Guam crash on video?
I don't have the software that allows me to grab it off YouTube. Yeah, there are tools out there you can grab stuff off of YouTube and create a digital recording on your hard drive or what have you. But all you have to do is go to YouTube and put in the keywords B2 crash Guam, and you'll see it all in all its gore. That was 1998.
What was the beef? What was the beef that Northrop got into with who was ever head of the government controlled program for the stealth bomber? I mean, he got into some beef with them. That's why they were scrapped, right?
When you go back to the late 40s, early 50s, there was a big political stink about a lot of the Northrop forces, and I've got there. By the way, if you're interested in more details, there's a whole bunch of books here on the whole subject. This one is a mouthpiece for Jack Northrop, and they talked all about this political controversy. The Northrop forces argued that they got railroaded by Stuart Symington, who was like a Secretary of Defense, became a vice president at Convair, a consolidated aircraft, which was building the competing B-36. And there was charges of shenanigans going on here and political forces that let the B-36 go into production and all the Northrop flying wings to be canceled. But in fact, a more balanced view would see that, you know, if you look at the actual bomb runs and the technical performance of the two platforms, there was no contest. B-36 was inherently more stable. Now, you could get the YB-49 to get settled down, but it took too much time. You'd miss your target. By the time you got it settled down to drop, you're gone, you're gone, it's gone right by it. B-36 was inherently more stable, so, but there's still arguments to this day about whether there's some funny business going on in that procurement program way back then. Yes?
Have you seen any video, well, not at the time, film, of the Horton brothers being interviewed or of their flights, the two that actually flew?
I haven't seen anything like that. There's somebody I'm sure there's books and documentaries out on the Horton brothers that are far beyond what I've seen.
The videos that you had, specifically the history that you, too long, is that available?
Oh, sure. You can get this on Amazon.com. It's like a $20 item plus shipping. So this is nifty. Yeah, you can look at all the chapters in great depth. In the history chapter, they talk about some early crude attempts at stealth. They're hilarious. But, you know, they had to walk before they ran. Yes?
Two things. First, what Mark said, there is a limited edition fine art print on the market. It's been out for a number of years that shows Paul Tibbets and his grandson with a B-29 and a B-2 in the background, signed by both of them, Paul Tibbets and his grandson. Number two, in the 1950s movie War of the Worlds, starring Gene Barry.
Yes.
Great scene, color scenes of the YB-49 taking off and actually on a bomb run over the desert, trying to destroy the Martians. It's a great video.
Mm-hmm. I remember that. I remember seeing that movie when it came out in the theater. As a youngster, that scared me. That movie, War of the Worlds, it was terrifying. Just a postscript on stealth. Northrop didn't know what he had for stealth. They were doing test flights off the coast of Southern California with the XB-35 piston bomber. The coastal radar were losing them. They had trouble finding these bombers. They didn't know what they had at that time. They were looking at other advantages for the flying wing and not stealth. So that was a good precursor, foreshadow of what was to come. Yes?
Do they use IFF or anything internally so that if they're flying in formation, they can keep track of where the rest of their squadron is? Or that you know of?
That's a good point. I mean,
if you're IFR, you still should know where your other aircraft are. You're going to have a collision.
Mm-hmm. Well, I presume if they're in formation flying and civilian duty, they would have transponders operating. So blah, 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 they make it well known that you're there. When they're actually in a combat run, they have to have complete radio silence. They don't want to be broadcasting like a radio station when they're going over enemy territory. So complete silence, no electromagnetic emissions at all if they can get away with it. A transponder could help them in formation flying. I can't recall seeing them in formation. At some time, maybe for an air show, they have appeared in formation. But they're usually lone wolves going in, doing their dirty business.
80 bombs. I think the bomb load probably exceeds a B-52. 40,000 pounds.
It might exceed the B-52. The B-1B can actually carry more ordnance weight. And the B-2 is one of only a couple of aircraft that is now allowed to carry free-fall thermonuclear weapons. The B-61, the B-83, so forth. There's just three nukes that they're allowed to carry, and they have parachute drogue chutes on them, so that they can drop them and then get out of town. There's probably only one or two other airframes left that is allowed to carry free-fall nuclear weapons, but we also have a lot of thermonuclear cruise missiles available. B-52 can send those and stand off and hundreds of miles out and get away. So that's it. If there are no more questions, I'll wrap it up. Thank you.
Thank you very much.